Welcome to the Voodoo Power Podcast.
Welcome to Plates of Pancakes. We're sitting down today with Adam Vogel. Coach Vogel is department chair, PE teacher, and strength conditioning coach at Homewood-Flossmoor High School. Coach Vogel has been featured in Simply Faster and is a contributor to the TFC. He is a former collegiate and arena football player and has a BS in psychology and a master's degree in teaching. So welcome to the show, Coach.
Hey, brother. Thanks for having me back on again. Excited.
I kept your bio a little brief. I know since the last time we've talked, you've done a ton of stuff. So as opposed to listing it all, I just kept it brief and we'll just jump into the content.
Sounds good.
So we were down in Tennessee together and we had a notebook session and then we always have tons of conversations. But I know talking down there, one thing that you had kind of gotten down the rabbit hole of was square one. You got pretty deep into certification on that. So it's been a few months since you've done that. What kind of changes and benefits are you seeing there?
Yeah, we're it's more on an individual level. The square one, I don't really do a lot of the Signal 6 yet because we do a lot of RPR to start like our football sessions, things like that. It's just another way to implement when I can't figure out what the problem is. A couple times I've leaned into it where I'll do a reset with square one first, and it works. But sometimes I think the kids get a little bit, they're like their reaction is like, oh, they want more attention than that, right? Like, because I can clear them out within a couple minutes sometimes. So what we'll typically do is if the queuing doesn't work, if any modifications or like regressions or progressions don't work, then we'll go into either using like RPR or square one or something along those lines to fix the issue. And then the other thing that we'll do with square one is if there's like an injury, like I'm not talking about an injury, like I'm talking about like something sore. If it's an injury, they're going to the trainer, right? Like I know my lane, I'm not going to go outside of that. But like, oh, my shoulder's a little sore, or it might be clicking, or like, oh, their hamstring sore. Then what we'll usually do is I've been actually doing some like body tempering. And then I'll square one them with after the body tempering, or we'll do some RPR and then use the square one as the reset from the RPR. And what I mean by that, like, is I want to know whether or not their pathway of accepting it or not. And so all it is just a reflex test for square one. Once we get that reflex test baseline, then I know whether or not their body accepted whatever we did with them to then hopefully have them be able to perform. So this week even I had a girl with a hamstring that we worked on that a little bit with square one and body tempering, and she was ready to go right away. She said she felt like $1 million. So we were like, okay, cool. Had another guy that was a football player for me. It was his quad, real tight, and they're in the middle of camp and they have scrimmages and everything else. So we did light tempering with him, and then we did a little bit of RPR with him, and then used square one, and he was able to do everything but his cleans that day. I think he could have done his cleans, but he just chose, like, hey, like if you don't want to do those today, that's fine. Do clean pulls, and he did his clean pulls, which is fine. Like we still got what we wanted out of the training session.
So I want to get into tempering, but before we get there, talking about this square one, because you'd also posted some stuff earlier this week it was pretty cool that you'd sent me on speeds, and so we'll hit that. But
yeah,
we had talked square one down there in Memphis, and you said that if you get a reset, your faster lifts, you'll see an improvement on. So
yeah.
if let's say your bench press is 185 and you're moving it at 0.7 meters per second or whatever it is, if you could do a quick reset, you can figure that out to open them neural pathways to actually speed up that lift. Have you seen more results with that?
A little bit, only because the time in the summertime so crunched, just because we don't have. I got 45 minutes with them basically to get them started, get them lifting, then they go out to practice. So it's almost like treating them in season. So I haven't done a ton of it where I could say like it's a case study or anything along those lines. However, like what you're referring to is when we were doing the certification, one of the things, there's a group of us and most of us knew each other, which was kind of good. So the second day, Sean Sherman, the guy that was training us for square one, and the guy that created square one was like, hey, go through your normal training and let's see how square one can help and work. And so I'm a skeptic at heart. Like I want to see the science behind things. And so not that I don't believe in square one, but I was getting the training on it. So I knew that there's something there, but I didn't think that it was going to be like, I didn't know how much truth is to it. Is it placebo or whatever it could possibly be? And what really kind of convinced me was we had all guys that had maxes over bench max over 250 or whatever. I can't remember the exact numbers, but bottom line, we knew that they had the strength to go at 1.0 meters per second at about 45-55% of their max. And so I think we put 185 on there. I think it was 185 that we put on there, and all of them when we first tested them, we had them do 2 sets because I didn't want to do like a set and then the second set that just shows they get better, right? So we did 2 sets of them trying to hit 1.0 at 185. We had 4 guys that we worked with on it, and the fastest they got was I think it was like 0.77 was the fastest on a rep, and most of the guys were in the 0.6s. So we know they're strong enough, but they just couldn't hit the speed we want them to. So then we went through square one, reset them with square one, and then we had them do a third set. That third set, everyone was in the 1.0 range as their average of the 5 reps, as opposed to just 1 rep. And one of the guys that was getting the training, he was 0.99. So I was pretty impressed with those numbers right there. Just seeing that, and then to make sure that it wasn't just a one-off. The other 2 things that I did was we took one of the guys getting the training, and we worked on treadmill with him a little bit. He has a treadmill at his place, and so we saw some improvements there with him doing that in between sets. And then we also did some of the game speed and change of direction with him because he's kind of familiar with wide base crossover, and so he wanted to learn that when he was here when we were all together anyway, asking off of me. And so I said, hey, look, we'll go through it. So we actually used square one to help him get it. And it was funny because like when you see a guy shrug or kind of like they know how to do it, they just messed up. And then we went to see whether or not their body accepted the response by checking it, and it didn't. So then you'd square one him, then he'd look better the next rep. And then you would ask him too. And before I'd even give him any feedback, I'd ask, hey, how'd that feel? Because that was not measurement. That was all just objective data watching him. But so I wanted to see both, like, okay, objectively, how does a person feel going through it, and how do they accept it, and think that it's working for them, and then also objectively by looking at BBT metrics or looking at the metrics using treadmill or something like that.
Now I know you've been tempering, and Brandon Bird helped me figure out tempering, and then I've been able to talk to Donnie a little bit privately and kind of get some stuff squared away where we're helping athletes here. Especially in season, it seems like them little nicks and bruises, they walk around really tight, especially in the calves. It seems like it, especially if a kid's cramping up on a Friday night. Tempering seems to really alleviate that. Now that you've kind of added that in, what are you kind of seeing with some of your athletes?
Yeah, like just them feeling better. You know what I mean? Like as far as with the tempering, I haven't really looked at like doing like a pre-post test or anything like that with them, or longitudinal studies with them. We don't have a lot of time to do a lot of tempering because that does take a little bit more time, right? Like especially if we're gonna do like the Donnie Thompson way of like putting the cylinders on the calves and letting it sit there for 5 to 10 minutes even. So most of it, what we'll do is I'll just go slow with my body weight as a roll on a foam roller, or I got this cold steel pipe that I'll use with my body weight that gets a little bit more trigger pointy because it's only about an inch thick pipe, so that's going to really put some pressure into into that muscle tissue. But one of the things that we've always done, which remind me of body tempering when we're doing recovery work, like you're talking about the calves, is we'll imagine the athlete sitting on the ground, and they have their calf up on a foam roller, just one calf, and then you start just above the Achilles heel, and then the partner puts one hand on the ankle below the foam roller and one on the shin above the foam roller, and we'll go cross-sectionally horizontally with the rolling it back and forth, almost like you're cutting a steak against the grain, right? So then we'll work up the calf that way, and then we'll have the athlete do 6 to 8 swipes with the grain, and they stand up and they feel like $1,000,000. They feel like they can jump higher. Like, and I don't know what it is about breaking up the myofascial tissue horizontally as opposed to running with the grain vertically. But there's something there too. I don't know if you've tried that. Have you seen anything with that before, or seen anyone do anything like that?
Okay, so I had a guy come down. He was kind of watching what we were doing, and the conversation turned to tempering a little. It's not exactly like what you're saying, but it's getting close. And he said he was somewhere and he was doing it. And for shin splints, they would do with a golf ball the side of the calf. So not necessarily where the the soleus or the gastroc is, but you're getting off to the side, and they would roll that out heavily, and it would take care of shin splints. And so I had a kid on the 4x2 team that was struggling with shin splints, and I ended up tempering him. I didn't roll him out. I tried rolling him out with the golf ball, but it wouldn't let go. So I put the tempering device on there. I rolled it up real slow, and that would be my next question that I was getting into. But when it released, I mean, it's pretty violent. I've seen some really violent releases. That's what I was going to ask you, is if you ran into that. But when that thing popped, I mean, he was good. They went on to break the school record 3 more times after that, and he was good to go. But he just couldn't get that to release any other way.
Yeah, like we had the one girl that's talking about with the hamstring. She's going to Wisconsin, so she's heavy into her volleyball, summer volleyball right now, and like her hamstring was so tight, and so when like she was just twitching, like her whole leg and lower body was just twitching as we were doing some tempering on that hamstring, and then we didn't get it to quite release all the way. I know so it's going to take a few more sessions probably before she feels even better, but she still felt good enough to perform, and she said that's the best she's felt in a while. But then what else we do too is whenever I temper, like we do tempering with a certain muscle part, the antagonist muscle. So like for her quad, we'll then stretch the quad. So I don't necessarily worry about stretching the hamstring if that's the one that feels tight on them. I worry about stretching the antagonist muscle, and they see a lot of relief there. And then like you could also possibly even look at the if you think about the lateral slings, the opposite antagonist muscle, right? So her other quad could possibly be tight as well. So I haven't got quite that deep in it, and each athlete's different, right? But for her that worked. Again, I just kind of do it individually. Like I had a kid with a shoulder issue, and we did that. I always get the name of it wrong. Inhibition. But anyway, what I'll do is I'll have them hold their arm up, and I'll say, hey, I'm gonna press it. I'm gonna have you press against my hand in all 4 directions for like a shoulder, and they'll do that. And they'll just do it for about 5 seconds, like an isometric push in all 4 directions. And then I'll say, okay, I want you to hold your arm straight, and I'm going to push all 4 directions for about 5 seconds each. And I want you to keep that arm stiff. And then I have them bring their arm back down and bring it back up. And they're like, Coach, it feels 100 times better. And it's just your body understanding and your brain realizing that, like, hey, like if it's sore, like I said, if it's an injury, that's not going to work. It's still going to be injured. Go see the trainer. But if it's not, then your brain just, and your neural pathways are going to accept and say, hey, look, I can do this. I feel safe. And sometimes it's just giving them that confidence to be able to know that.
Now, I got a few notes in there on things that you said. So on the hamstring, I don't know if you've ever tried it. Bird helped me understand it. But a lacrosse ball and voodoo floss and spot treat and then stretch into that. Have you done much of that or tried that?
No, I've heard of it. I think like back in the day, was it Kelly Starlet or somebody else that was doing a lot of that with CrossFit athletes, right? With like flossing with the lax ball. I haven't thought about it since you just mentioned that. That's what just came to my mind. And so I could see that definitely working, right? Because it's just pinpoint tempering, right? I mean, you're using the floss as the pressure and the lax ball the trigger point.
I had a kid, he was going into the late part of baseball and he had hurt his hamstring. He came in, his parents, they were fine with trying it. What do? You heard it on a Friday night, you got to pitch Tuesday, you got to do something. So we tempered him out, we spot treated, and then we tinged unit. And he was able to go that Tuesday. Now, I'm sure it was not comfortable for him, but it's amazing how closer that got him to 100% than where he would have been.
Yeah. Well, I just think like we all just as humans, we do so much, right? So anything you're doing physically is going to have some sort of cost on your body, right? And a lot of times that cost is good, right? Because you need to move. Your body knows it needs to move, but then when you start to overdo things, especially anything that's a skill, like in baseball and these other sports, it gets so specific. You do that repetitive motion so much, then all of a sudden you have these like anything that goes outside of that normal groove that you kind of feel good in, then all of a sudden that's where problems arise, right? So like that's one of the main reasons why I think the weight room is so important for athletes and student athletes, is because that we get to hit some of those things that they don't always get a chance to hit, right? So that this way things feel better from a holistic standpoint. So maybe it's not always driving performance, but maybe it's just mitigating injury.
You spoke about lateral slings in there, and I've asked a few people this, and I haven't really gotten the answer I thought I was seeing. But have you noticed in a lateral sling, let's say they're a right-handed thrower, that their left leg is going to be shorter?
Oh, I haven't looked at that. That's interesting.
It seems like that happens a lot, and I don't know if it's because that right side, that upper back tightens up, and then it pulls that leg up with it.
Mm-hmm.
I've asked a few people that, and they're like, I don't know. I mean, they didn't see the correlation, but every kid I lay down that's a right-handed thrower, his left leg's going to be different than his right leg, and I just think it has to be involved with that lateral sling.
That doesn't surprise me. I don't know about the length, but like it doesn't surprise me at all that there's going to be asymmetries, especially when you're doing something so much on one side over the other. And it's okay to have those asymmetries. One of the things that I can tell you is they're usually a lot stronger eccentrically on that block leg, right? So if they're right-handed, it's the left leg that's doing all the deceleration and taking on the eccentric force. So that left leg is usually the one that can balance a little bit better on things along those lines, right? Because it can stop better. Whereas like the right leg is going to be more of the driver, the concentric action for them, especially if they're like a pitcher.
There's a few other things. So now you're talking pitcher. So if you get a kid that has elbow pain, I've noticed it in the shoulder blade. Like if you temper out that shoulder blade, assuming it's not Tommy John's, that elbow pain will dissipate. I don't know why it's back there, but that seems to be where it is. I don't know if you've tinkered with that any or not.
Not much. My concern with I can see that working, but when you think about throwing action, everything's internally rotating. So the wrist is internally rotating, the elbow is internally rotating, the shoulders internally rotating, and so the pressure has to come out somewhere, and typically it's going to be the elbow. And so when you think about like pitcher like that, when are they going to externally rotate and get those actions? And so, like you're saying with doing the tempering, that's why you see all the TRX face pulls and band pulls and the J bands and all that kind of stuff doing that. But at some point, and I do like the bands because it has that oscillatory feeling to it too. But like the problem too is at some point they need to do something that's going to strengthen that, because once you get strong at doing the bands, like what's your next step after that? Because you're still trying to throw faster and throw harder and things. And so you have to do something for that external rotation type of action. And so like one of the things that we played around a little bit with was like using like a K pulley to pull back and then stop. So you're getting that eccentric stopping action, which is pulling back. Something I did at my last school, which I know a lot of people think is crazy, is we snatched with our baseball players. In season, we had dumbbell one arm snatch, or they would snatch pull. But out of season, we would snatch with them, because when you think about how the joints stack with a Olympic lift like snatch, is you're externally rotating the wrist, internally rotating the elbow, and externally rotating the shoulder. So now it's in a position where the joints can be stacked, right? External, internal, external. And so we saw a lot of shoulder health from that, to the point that in my 8 or 9 years at Bradley, I really don't know about a single shoulder issue that we had with our baseball players. And we had one go to Major League. We had one get drafted in Major League Baseball. We had probably, I don't know, about one every year go Division I, and then a bunch of them would go Division III and NAIA. So we had a lot of success doing that. And I kind of liken it to like a running back, right? Like you see, it'd be like telling a running back, hey, we're not going to do any legs because you're a running back. You get enough in practice. Well, that just doesn't make sense. Yeah, I mean, like that's almost laughable, right? And so like the same thing goes for baseball players. I'm not saying that if it causes pain, they should not overhead press or they should not do something like that. But if it doesn't cause pain, we need to make sure that we're strengthening those movement patterns and those joints and muscles, right? So
Now, we've talked about tempering a lot, and I've just got a few more questions, and we'll move on to some other crazy topics that we can think of. But have you noticed in the shoulders that if you roll out that lat, which is very painful, but if you roll out that lat, it takes care of a lot of those shoulder, especially up in the bottom of the armpit. If you've got like you said you had the cold steel, the small one. Have you noticed relief there? And the other part of that is when you get that rolled out, have you noticed that the cleans get better because they can get underneath the bar?
Yeah, I'm glad you went there because I don't see a lot of shoulder issues typically. I think it's just because of maybe the way that we're always trying to do at least 2-to-1 vertical pull to vertical press. At least 2-to-1, usually it's 3-to-1 in our programming. So we typically don't see a lot of shoulder issues. But with the cleans, one of the issues that we really have is our lats are really tight and our athletes really struggle with getting their elbows forward in the clean. And so we do a ton of stuff with the lats. And like you said, we'll have them do the basic ones we'll have them do reach through. So they'll be in a quadruped position. Their arm will go through, keeping the one arm on the ground, keeping that arm straight. And then the other arm reaches through with the back of the hand on the ground until the elbow touches, and then open it all the way up to the sky and looking up to the sky as they do it. And that's our first mobility for the lat. And then we'll get into what I call a rack stretch. So you can use a TRX strap, a band, or the rack. And I have them stand about arm's distance away from the rack. Push your hand into the rack with the thumb up, and then pull the hips back as you let that armpit fall. So then you're going to get that mobility there. If they're still really tight, then we'll either roll them out or I'll have them go and put that arm over, like chicken wing, over the barbell. That's on the rack, like that's just about chest height, and then dig in that way, like you're talking about, and just let that dig in there. And that usually helps with loosening up those lats so they can get the elbows through, because they always think it's a wrist problem, because that's where they feel the pain is, in the wrist, because the load is going on the wrist because the elbow's down. Well, the problem isn't the wrist. The problem is the lats not letting the elbows come forward. And I got to do it too. Even when I clean, if I don't stretch out my lats, they stay tight all the time.
Now, when you're talking about leaning over a bar, do you put a racquetball or a lacrosse ball or something on that bar with some sort of tape so that they can grind that armpit out?
No, I just have them use the bar and their lat. And the only reason why I don't give them a lot, like whenever I put balls in the weight room, they go flying everywhere. I got high school kids, and I mean, if we didn't have windows and everything else, and someone get hit in the head, I have no problem them playing catch in there. But trying to mitigate anything that they miss throw or whatever, I try to keep those down. So whenever we bring balls in the weight room, it's targeted and like it's very controlled in that manner when we do that. Typically, when I'm doing the stuff with the barbell, that's a one-on-one situation. Like everybody else is doing their lifts. I see the kids have really struggling with their elbows. Hey, finish that set. Come over here. Let's work on loosening that lat while partners are lifting, and then we get them back into his next set.
Now, I'm sure we could talk about this all night, but we've got plenty of other things we could talk about too. So we'll head that direction. But I know last fall into the winter, we had talked quite a bit about K-Box. You'd been using that to potentiate. So what kind of benefits were you seeing, and how are you using that K-Box to help your athletes?
Yeah, to preface this, my interest really lately is into fast eccentrics. So when I say fast eccentrics, I mean anything that's from 0.75 meters per second or quicker on the eccentric, not the concentric. So and when I say eccentric, not just dropping down, but getting out of coming down, right? So think about that braking action, especially for deceleration and change of direction. And so what we did was we had an extra fly we were checking out, and I wish we could have got it. Just comes down to priorities and we couldn't prioritize that just yet, but we got to get them up for a while. And Xfly is a great company to really see those things because I can see the meters per second on their app. And so when we were doing it, one of the things we do with our basketball players is I wanted to focus on basketball because they were we got it before the season started. And so I wanted to really see what type of effects we could have with it and see if the coaches could give me any qualitative data that they're seeing on the court. And so when we were doing the eccentrics, we went with heavy eccentrics first, 0.3 to 0.65 meters per second, going slower and heavier, like a bigger wheel when I say heavier, and them really trying to get out of that hole. And so we did it from a squatting standpoint, so a parallel stance, and we did it from a split squat, staggered stance. And so we do it 1 to 2 times a week, depending on if we could get them on there twice. And we do usually 2 to 3 sets of 8 reps. And I just sometimes it was 6 if the numbers were going down. So like if we were seeing they weren't hitting those numbers, we would stop them, right? So after the first 2 weeks, with the Eccentric, it has a machine on it, so you can actually overspeed pull them down. So you can pull them down faster than what they're actually going. So then we started ramping that up, and then one of the funny things about that side note is you start to see what comes out as far as being an issue of it being like weak in the ankle or the calf or a hip issue, because when you pull them down faster than they're ready for, like that's the part that you see to kind of like goes first. But then once we got through that, I think we did that for close to six weeks, and then the rest of the time we had it was about 8 or 10 more weeks. Then we did fast eccentrics, contrasted with a slow eccentric if we had an extra day. So then we were going at 1.0 meters per second, and we just kept trying to go to a bigger wheel at 1.0. And I think we went, I don't remember the size of them because I just remember the colors. We went from a little blue to a yellow and a blue for most of our basketball players, which was really cool to see that they were getting better with their deceleration and with their eccentric power. But I wasn't really focused too much on the power. I just focused on like, hey, I want to see if this quality works. And I know nobody's doing fast eccentrics, at least at the high school level, like targeted the way that we're doing it that I know of. So it was just something that was interesting to me. And I wanted to do it with football. We just have too many guys, and we only had one extra fly because we were getting ready to do the game speed stuff in the winter with them. And I figured that would have a big impact for them too, but we just didn't get the opportunity to do that.
So me and you agree 100% on the fast eccentrics. We've had this conversation before. I think that's what carries over to sport the best. I mean, slow eccentrics, if you're trying to put size on, that's great. But Ralph Ullman and Randy Huntington, they had really gotten good with this idea. And Louis Simmons talked about it a ton. But getting down, that's why he used bands, was to overspeed that eccentric and get down there under control and get down there fast and lock it out. So that's the benefit that we had seen. We had used it for our 200-meter guys. And we would hold them in ISO for 10 seconds, and then we'd let them, in a split stance, we'd let them push for 10 seconds. That way you're kind of getting that timing of the 200 in there. You're getting that 20-second time, and then we do that twice, so that way each leg was forward. I seen great results with that. They looked really good when the state meet come around.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I mean, you can only concentrically push what your body's going to accept, right? Eccentrically to handle. So I think that's the magic in doing eccentrics, is that it's gonna help the concentric just because they complement each other. Whereas it's kind of like, so I like, let's see this. So I liken that to acceleration and max velocity work. Okay. So max velocity helps acceleration. Well, why? Because you have to accelerate to hit max velocity. So that's why those two help each other. Whereas if you just do acceleration, it's not going to help max velocity because you don't have to accelerate, or sorry, you don't have to get to max velocity or top end speed if you're just doing acceleration. So that's why it's a one-way street. And I look at it, eccentrics and concentrics being the same way. You can do fast concentrics, but you don't have to do the eccentric portion of it. So it's not going to help the eccentrics as much. But if you're going to do anything concentrically, you have to do, if you're going to focus on the eccentric portion, it automatically has to help the concentric because you have to go fast enough to be able to decelerate fast enough.
And that's where I'm at now. We have a javelin kid, and we're spending a lot of time looking at it as Eccentrics, how fast he is. But then on the flip side, we're looking at time to peak and the EA index. So that has me down this crazy rabbit hole of rough stock riders, your bareback riders, your saddle bronc riders, and your bull riders. If your time to peak is good and your eccentric speeds are fast, the legs should be able to work in a manner that gets more successful rides in with higher scores. I don't know that anybody's quite doing that yet. I think that's the future, though.
Yeah. I wonder too, like we one time we're talking about ropers, and when they jump off of the horse, I think too, like how much can they eccentrically like accept jumping off the horse? I know that those arenas are pretty soft, right? But knowing that they can land stiff enough to accelerate out of that first step from hitting the ground to the next step of the boot hitting the ground on the stride, I think that there might probably be something there for them to be quicker. I mean, they're fast already, but like that, if I was training those guys, that probably would be one of the things I'd be really focusing on.
Well, and that's the great thing about the K-Box, because if those kids aren't ready, that pulley will pull you down through that hole. You know, when I put a kid on it for the first time, I always make sure I'm standing there because they're not ready for what that thing will do.
Yeah, and I love that you built your own, and and you can still do overspeed eccentrics with that as well, or overloaded eccentrics with it by putting extra handle on there, and then you pulling him up faster than what he's coming up on his own, because then the athlete has to stop that inertia that you created with them.
Now that you mentioned that, I hadn't even thought about doing that until you said that, but that really wouldn't be hard to do. Instead of tying it back off to a leg, you just tie it to a handle, and then you're running them. You wouldn't want to kill one, but you're running them pretty hard, and that may be something that I have to look into now. Okay, I've got one. I know you use arena gear, or you used to use arena gear.
Yeah, we still use it right now. Yeah.
So we was stuck in Cody for a couple nights, and it just so happened that our hotel room was we had to walk everywhere because I had a big hole in my radiator, but the arena was right across the road, so we could walk over there. Barrel racing's barrel racing. I'm not a huge barrel racing fan. I'm not going to seek it out, but if it's in a rodeo, I'll watch. They're using arena gear, and I'm kind of watching it. Now that I'm more into sprinting, it's amazing what you notice. But they had a gal; she hit a 16.2, right? I mean, that's moving. That's getting there. She missed 3 leads, so she took the barrel on her right side first. But when her horse had broke the timeline, it was in the left lead. So that horse drifted. Had to switch leads, take the barrel, then it comes out in the right lead. Well, then she has to get her left lead. Didn't get her left lead soon enough, drifted, come out of the barrel. She's in her right lead, and then she'd come around, and then when she come around, maybe she only missed 2 leads. I figure each lead cost her at least 1/10 of a second. I feel like she should have been under 16 had she understood what those leads were doing to her. And now that I guess I watch so much sprint, and I'm like, I got to talk to Adam when I see him next about this, because she was just missing leads right and left. That horse was just so fast, it was able to overcome it.
Well, and the other thing too is like, well, the horse was so fast it was able to overcome it. But the other thing too is like, had she maybe had the horse go a little bit slower, she would have been faster, right? So slower into the turn and then faster out of the turn, slower into the turn, faster out of the turn, so the horse can control being tighter on the barrel, right?
Yeah, and then so if you think about it, that left lead had them drift, so it's almost like sprinting the curve, you know?
Yeah.
If they're drifting because their foot's over the midline, it's kind of the same thing. Not quite kinda. Well, they're never going to hold that curve, and they're just going to fly out of it. So yes, there's a couple things there. Come in just a hair more controlled, and in the correct lead, you're not going to drift.
Yeah.
And then make the turn.
So Tony Blahnik would call that spinning out, right? So you're, instead of pushing off the back foot, you're spinning on the front foot.
Essentially.
Yeah. And so and drifting, I think, is a great term for that, because if you think about like a car that goes into a turn too fast, the back end's going to slide out, right? Like that's what you're kind of talking about, correct?
Yep.
And so, yeah, so when we see that back end slide out, that means they went into it too fast. And so I would say that she would have been fast. She would have had a better time going slower, which sounds counterproductive. and then accelerating out of that, and then letting the horse slow it down a little bit into. Or it's best not even to let this horse slow down. The horse uses the same speed that can get through everything without having to drift.
And you watch the younger girls do it. They don't realize what's going on, and that horse it's going too slow. It'll have to come down to a trot to catch the lead and then come back up in the correct lead. So then that's all costing them time too.
Yeah.
It's one of those deals you have to be cognizant enough that when you take off and you cross the timeline, you have to know what lead your horse is in so you know what barrel to take. Well,
yeah.
Do you take the right one or do you take the left one?
Yeah, they can choose right or left, yeah. Which makes it a little bit different, I suppose, like it's not predetermined. They get a little bit more freedom with that.
Yeah, and some horses are better one way or the other, which people are the same way. So that brings me into a conversation we had in Memphis. The 5-10-5.
Yep.
So what are you looking at? I know your fastest is probably going to be a brake plant separate coming off that line, but a wide base crossover could give you the same time or even a better time if that's what the athlete's prepared for. So when you're watching a kid and you're helping with a 5-10-5, how are you kind of setting them up to come out of those turns?
Yeah, I do it a little bit differently than most, only because I had a really good pro agility. I hate using myself as an example. I had a really good pro agility. I ran like a 3.9 consistently all the time. If we're talking about combine prep, or like you talk about the pro shuttle 5-10-5, then we're going to count our steps because we know that the line is stagnant. It's never going to move. So we actually teach the athletes how to count their steps so they don't have to worry about the line. You're going to always touch it. Most of them, it's for me, it was 2.5 steps to get to the first line. Well, I was better at leaning and reaching for it, keeping my feet behind the line. So then I would brake plant separate out of that, meaning that I'm just pushing off and opening up. I'm not bringing my rear leg across the hip. And so that was just how I did it, and I was comfortable doing it that way. So I pretty much teach it that way if the athlete can do it. If they can't, then we'd have them take an extra step, go over the line, so they're touching in between their feet, and then their wide base crossover, using a wide base crossover to get across, which takes a little bit longer. And that's how most combine guys teach them to do it. I don't know if I'd have to talk to some combine prep guys on why they choose to do it that way or whatever, but I think the biggest thing is a lot of times athletes aren't strong enough within the lateral plane, frontal plane to push off and feel comfortable with that growing pushing off, right? And then I'll also see a little bit of, if an athlete can do it maybe on the right side, they might not be able to do it with the left side, right? So we were talking about asymmetries before, and I'll see that a lot when we're doing our change of direction training, that they might look really good going to their left, but then when they go to their right, it's totally awkward for them. And you'll see that a lot in defensive ends that only play one side of the ball. Like they might be, if they're like a right end, then they're really good and they feel really comfortable pushing off the right foot, but they don't feel as comfortable pushing off the left foot.
It seems like the hardest thing to teach those guys is they have to get the weight off the foot before they try to move it. Mm-hmm. And more times than not, they try to move that foot with the weight on it, and then it slows them down. So how do you start creating that body awareness so they know, hey, we've got to get outside leverage, we got to get inside leverage, kind of like what Villani shows in his videos, so that we can move them feet where we want them to go?
Yeah, that's something I like. That's something I love about Tony Villani, is that the way that he teaches it is the way that I thought about it in my head. And I played football pretty much my entire life, from 5th grade all the way up till I was 27 years old. And so when he started, I could never make sense of inner edges, outer edges, what foot, lead foot, whatever, because everything's happening so fast. The last thing I want to be doing is thinking about what my feet are doing when I got another task, being the game of football that I'm playing. So when he started talking about brake foot, that made sense to me. So am I breaking on my inside foot or am I breaking on my outside foot? Because that's where the stopping's coming from. So that makes total sense to me. And so that's really the way that he taught the change of direction side of it all. I kind of try to mirror what he said, because it just rings a bell, and it resonates with our athletes too, because that makes sense to them. If I'm doing a brake plant separate, I got to brake on my inside foot. So if I'm going left, it's my left foot. So that's how we kind of talk to them about it. So, and then we also will do it in place first. So we'll do reps in place where we're acting like we're running, and then we just break and we'll hold it. And then we'll go from a break with a hold into a break with a hold into a release after on the whistle. Then we'll go into just one whistle, they'll break and release, and this is all in place. And then we'll go into where they're running 5 yards forward. And that basically means they take one hard step and then they hold that speed, and then we'll go into 10 yards forward, and then we'll start timing them so they can see what their times are with it. Because now they know how to do it. It looks really like it's really, it sounds complicated. It's really easy. It's like, and I know from a ecological dynamics perspective, those that are like into that field, this doesn't really fall into that because it's all pre-rehearsed. But the whole point of this is for them to understand what we're trying to what they're trying to learn. And it's not, I don't think about it as fundamental. I think it's just more about understanding, like once they understand what we're talking about and we're putting vocabulary to what they do naturally, now they can make decisions off of it.
And that's where we'll go. We'll start talking about the decisions and what to do and when to do it. But before we get there, I know to set it all up, you're increasing their ability to deaccelerate. So you're looking at how fast are they going. So you're watching their speed on their fly intent to make sure that it's an acceptable time. And then you're trying to shut them down, starting at 5 yards and then coming back to 3 yards, and then when working that in. And I know that you're wanting, let's see, you're wanting 2/10 of their fly time. You're not wanting to be under 2/10 of their best fly time on their DXL. Is that correct?
Yeah, about that. So this is funny. This is one of my favorite days. It's so funny. The kids get a lot out of it, and we spend literally like a day on it, maybe 2 days if we have time. But it's really just like a reference point for them to kind of understand what we're talking about. So, with our speed training, how we do our speed training, we're gonna do 30 yard into a 10-yard fly. So, and then if they can't get to the top end speed, I don't care. You can back up further. So like our track athletes that are state placers and stuff, they might run a full 60 so like a 50 into a 10-yard fly. I care less. I just want you to get the top velocity. And then we also look at their 5 yard into a 10-yard fly, meaning their acceleration. And the reason why we do the 5 yard lead is because it takes too long to have everybody start in the beam. And the other thing is, with sport, not all the time is it starts statically. So if you think about like soccer players, like you might come from a jog anyway into your top end or into your acceleration. So this kind of gives them a little bit more freedom to start how they feel comfortable out of a 2-point stance instead of a 3-point stance, which is not in very many positions in sports, basically other than linemen. So let's get them in a position that they feel more comfortable in, that's going to apply more to the sports that they play. But then once we do that, and we'll do some wickets and we'll do some other things to work on acceleration, like the shred mill and wall runs, and we'll work on some sled pushes, things like that. But when we get into the deceleration stuff, then I tell them, okay, look, we're gonna run our 2 accelerations like I did before. Go through as fast as you can. So they run their 2 accelerations, 5 to 10 yards. Then I say, okay, look, I want you to stop on a dime, right past this laser, and I put a green cone 1 yard away from the back end of the laser from the line, and then I put an orange cone another yard, and then I put a red cone another yard. So if you're in the red cone or the green, between the end line and the green cone, that's your time. If you end between the green cone and the orange cone, you have to add 1/10 of a second. And if you're between the orange cone and the red cone, you got to add 2/10 of a second. If you go beyond the red cone, it's a scratch. We're not even counting it, right? So like, because we're really working on you going through fast and stopping. And so like, let's say the kid's time is like a 1:27. Okay. So I want you to be able to stop, okay, in front of that green cone in a 1:47 is what I tell them. And it's okay if it's a 1:57. They don't know that I care about that, but like, it's okay if it's a 1:57. I want them to work on stopping. And so what we'll do is we'll say, hey, I want you to stop at that. They all try to stop parallel, by the way. I don't even tell them how to stop yet. They all try to stop parallel. And it's funny because like some of them are falling backwards. Some don't even know how to stop. Some like you see like the white ghost face on their head. Like they're like scared, like they're wide eyed. And, you know, like because I have to go as fast as you can and then get past it and stop. And then you got some that cheat it because they've done it before, and so they'll kind of jog the whole way and then like no, like I want you to go as quick as you did before and then stop. But anyway, that's when it's fun. We see it, and we've never had a knee blowout, nothing like that. But we see him stop, and then I ask him, why couldn't you stop as quickly? Well, I went, and they'll say, well, I went too fast. Okay, so what do we need to do differently? And they'll say, well, I need to run, I need to stop harder, is usually what they say. And I'm like, well, I thought you stopped as hard as you could. And they're like, well, I did. So I guess that's probably not the solution. You can try it again. You want to try it? And some of them will try it. And then I'll say, okay, if that doesn't work, what's another? Well, I need to go slower. Okay, you need to go slower, but then they go too slow. They don't understand what that speed is, or they'll say, I need to stop before the line. You know what I mean? Instead of stopping at the line. Well, then you're still putting on the brakes hard. And so finally, we'll get them to a point where someone will say, I need to go at a speed that I can stop at. And so what is that speed? Well, if I'm going 15 yards, because that's what they're running, you get 3 hard steps. 3 hard steps, and then hold that speed that you're going. Don't slow down, hold that speed, and you'll be able to stop at that speed, typically, if it's 3 hard steps. The really good athletes might be able to take like a 3.5 or 4. You know what I mean? Like they might go take 4. Or they can only take or if they're really good, they can only take 2 steps because they can get to that top speed quicker, right? So they'll take 2 steps and hold that. So either way, once they figure out how to control that speed and stop, then they start to see the correlation of what we're talking about. But then we not only do parallel, we'll do right leg forward and left leg forward, right? So if we talk about parallel, that's a wide base crossover. Now there's 2 wide base crossover with the left and the right. And then we got our break plant separate, which is a staggered stop with the left and the right. So then we start to let them see those times and what they're doing with that. And just tell them, hey, look, we want you to be within 0.2 of a second at the green cone. Sometimes it's 3. I'm okay with that, or 4, whatever. But they're learning how to control their speed that they've developed over the course of, however many weeks that we've been doing the fly 10s and the 5 and the 10-yard accelerations.
So from there, me and you have talked about this extensively, and down in Memphis, you could draw a crowd, it seemed like pretty quick whenever you started talking about this. So guys want to kind of know what you're doing, so we'll go through it a little bit. But you'll set up your roll 90 first, and you're just letting them go. You're just sending them as fast as they can go.
Yep.
And then you're using that as a teaching moment to back them off. Is that kind of how you set that up?
Yeah, so we'll do that stop thing. We'll do that one day of like we just talked about. And they forget it because they're high school kids, and it's okay. But they already have that imprinted on their brain now, so we can draw back to it as an example. So then, like you said, we'll run roll 90s, and I'll just say, hey, and this comes from that Tony Vellani curriculum that he sells for his XPE game speed. It's like $10 a month. It's worth it. Like buy it. It's $10. This is all the stuff that he does already. We'll just do a roll 90, go as fast as you can, and they're spinning out as we were talking about drifting with the horses, right? They're going into it way too fast, or they can't turn at all, and they just keep going straight, or they go too slow because they don't trust themselves to turn the corner fast. And the whole point of the roll 90, though, is you can't change your stride length. So the sprint actually is a 5-yard into a 10-yard sprint. Now, instead of going straight at 5 yards from the start laser, we're going to put a cone there, and there's going to be a corner. And then they got 5 yards on the other end where the finish laser is. And then I put a cone about 1 yard in front of the corner cone, and I put another cone about 2 yards behind the corner cone, or kitty corner from the corner cone, so that they have to stay tight to that cone. So when they go through that corner, the biggest thing with a roll 90 is you have to keep your stride length. So if I see it hitch or double up or plant off the outside foot, then that doesn't count, because we want to see that you keep your stride length all the way through, like you're turning a corner, like a soft corner almost. And so they'll go as fast as they can. They screw it up. They see their time. Most of them are in the 2s, like 2.0, 2:17. And then I say, okay, this time I want you to, the second time now, I want you to go into it I want you to go into it under control and then burst out of it. And so then they do a better job, and they start to see the times drop a little bit. And then I tell them, okay, look, you're going 10 yards. How many steps do we need to go 10 yards to maintain that speed? Well, coach, I don't remember. Well, how many was it for 15 yards? 3. Okay. So if you're only going 10, what do you think it is? Oh, 2. All right, cool. So every 5 yards is a hard step. So I'm going to take one hard acceleration step if I'm going 5. You guys are going 10. So how many do I need to take? Oh, I got to take 2, coach. Perfect. Take 2 hard steps. Typically with the girls, it's usually one extra step, unless they're a taller girl or they like have really good acceleration mechanics and things like that. So like some of our track athlete females can do it pretty well. Or like our basketball girls are really good at it too, because they're used to sprinting, are used to accelerating up and down the court. So anyway, they'll take 2 hard steps, keep their stride length, roll the 90, and they do and burst out once you hit the corner. And then all of a sudden, then we start to see some really good times. We'll see like anywhere from a 150 to like a 180, which is a really good time for those accelerations. I mean, for those roll 90s.
And then from there, you kind of do what you talked about earlier. You do your break plant separate and your wide base crossover all in place at first with the whistle to a breakdown, and then slowly work that until you're sprinting. Is that kind of how you set that up?
Yeah. So we've done it different each year because like we have a field turf down in the I'm in Illinois, so it's cold. We have a field turf down in the next to the field house. And so when I get that's when we're doing a lot of this stuff. Well, this last year it was unusually cold. We had more teams in there, things like that. So we had to do a lot of stuff in place or within a 5-yard range upstairs because we have 30 yards of turf in our weight room. So we did that as much as we could. So then when we went downstairs, what we did was we split them up into 2 groups, or no, sorry, 3 groups. So we'd have one doing roll 90s left while the one is doing roll 90s right. And then we're teaching the roll 90s and the break plant separate and the wide base crossover with the other group, and then they would rotate through. So this way we could get times on everybody, and we could also be able to get them a chance to practice and learn the techniques to everything we were doing.
You also set that up where you have 4 cones. Is that correct? And then you'll do a break plant separate around the 4 cones, wide base crossover. And then do you do a mix too? Do you do a wide base crossover on the first one, break plant separate on the second one?
Yeah. So this all comes from the Tony Villani stuff too. So I don't like the ladder stuff that he does is great. We just don't have enough ladders. We have so many guys. I hate having them to wait in line so much, but I have cones. I have a ton of cones. So we'll put the cones about 10 yards apart, make a square with them. And then we'll tell them like, hey, so it's 10 yards. How many hard steps are we taking? 2. Okay. Because it's 2 hard steps. One hard step every 5 yards. And then you're going to, so once they learn how to do all the stuff we talked about, doing it in place and then going 5 yards, then going 10 yards with the holds and all that kind of stuff, you know it now. Now you just need to work on practicing it yourself. And so using the cones as a closed cone drill, they'll go around each corner, like as a roll 90 on the first corner, the second corner, third corner, and then finish on the 4th corner. They'll just run through it. And then the next athlete goes. We'll do the same thing. Then they'll do like 2 to 4 each side. And then while we're timing them on the other groups, then once we get done with once they know how to do wide break plant separate, we'll teach them break plant separate doing all 4 corners. So they'll do probably 1 or 2 sets of roll 90 on each side. Then we're going to do more sets, like 2 to 4 sets of break plant separate as they go to each cone, learning that. Then we'll do the same thing for wide base crossover. Once they know them all, now to shorten up the time so we can get into the get away from the change of direction, get into more of the agility stuff, we'll have them just do those 4 cones where they go to the first cone doing a roll 90, second cone they do a break plant separate, the third cone they do a wide base crossover, and the 4th cone they do a fast feet replace, so that they can work on all 4 different movement strategies in one drill. And they'll do 2 to 3 to the left, and they'll do 2 to 3 to the right.
Now, once you set all this up, then you set up like a cognitive recognition. Mm-hmm. So if your receiver's going to a defensive back, how do you decide what you want them to do?
Yeah. So this is not in the game speed stuff. So this is where like I always want to try to put my own twist on it, or try to like how can I make this even better than what I know, and sometimes I screw it up. I don't know. But this is where our coaches really liked this was when we're talking about like a roll 90, when are you going to use a roll 90? Well, if you're let's talk about wide receiver is the easiest for, right? So when are we going to use roll 90 as a wide receiver? I'm going to use it as on a drag route, a shallow route, a mesh route. I'm going to use it on a sail route. Any of those types of routes, I'm going to do it where I'm going to be dragging across the field or something like that. Okay. So now you know when you use it. So now you need chances to use it. Okay. Now, if it's zone, you can pretty much do a roll 90 on most things, unless it's an angled route like a post or a curl or something like that. Then you're going to probably do a break plant separate. You're probably not going to do a wide base crossover or a fast read replace unless you're in the red zone. You might use fast read beat replace. But what we really get into with this is when we are in the when they go to man to man. So now let's not talk about how they line up or anything like that. Like, when am I going to get a chance to practice and use this? So how we line them up is we have a line of like 3 or 4 wide receivers, and then we have another line of like 3 or 4 DBs with one out over the wide receiver, and the rest of them are against the wall. And then I'll stand behind the DB, and I'll give them the wide receiver signal so he knows what route he's running, and then he can make a decision off what he's doing, what type of change direction he needs to use. So typically I'll either tell him 5 yards by putting a 5 up, 10 yards by making a fist, or vertical 15 by putting a finger in the air. So above 15 yards. So then I'll tell them if they're going to do an in by pointing in, or an out by pointing out towards the sideline, or I'll give them a post by pointing as an upper angle or each way, or I'll give them a curl by giving a downward point either way. And so then the wide receiver knows what his route is just by me putting 2 hands in up, like 5 yard in. Okay. So now when he's playing man, we don't know what type of movement decision he's going to use yet, because we don't know how the DB is playing him. If the DB is playing him tight, okay, the whole time, there's no way he's going to be able to use a roll 90 on a 5 yard in. So he's going to probably either have to use a break plant separator or a wide base crossover. So if he's playing him tight the whole time, it's probably going to have to be a wide base crossover, because he needs to use time, like getting the DB to think that he's going the opposite direction on a wide base, and then crossing over with his leg to get that separation. So when we talk about creating separation, I don't want him just catching the ball. I want him to be able to catch the ball while they have separation from the DB, so they have a chance to get yards after catch. If you want to, we go into more nuance. I'll let you ask questions before, but there's a lot more nuance where they get to make decisions off of that too.
Well, I know we had discussed it. So if the DB is playing off and they cannot get their hands on him, you're looking at a roll 90. That's the fastest thing you can do.
Yeah. So okay. When you look at the times with the different types of change direction, the fastest is actually a roll 90. You're not breaking your stride length. Most athletes thinks it's the slowest, but it's actually the fastest. The second fastest is a break plant separate, because the roll 90, you're not breaking at all. You're just maintaining your speed on a turn. On a break plant separate, we're breaking on the inside foot, planting off the outside foot. That's the second fastest. So it's about a tenth slower than the roll 90. Okay. When you get to the wide base crossover, you're going to break on the outside foot first, then put the inside foot down, and then you're going to cross the leg over. Okay. That's going to be at least a tenth of a second or 2/10 of a second longer than the break plant separate. And actually, I don't care what that time is. You want to make that a slower break, because you got to give the DB or the opponent guarding you, because this could be soccer or basketball too. We'll keep it as football because it's simple. It's simple to talk about DBs, wide receivers in my world, but we do it with basketball. We do it with soccer as well. But like when you do a wide base crossover, you're trying to get that defender to move their inertia the direction that they think you're going to go before you cross over. So if I want to go left, I want them to think that I'm going to go right. So the longer I can sit in that wide base and put my head to my right, that'll get that defender to move to their left, my right. So then I can go across my body to my left. And so I want to spend that time doing that to get them there. And so where does it come in for the DB or the wide receiver to make those decisions? If it's offense, defense, football gets more nuanced, because literally that's the wide receiver's job is to get open, and the DB's job is to cover him, especially when it's man. But any other sport, you can pretty much say, look, if I can't touch him at all, if I have to jump and reach for him and I can't touch him, the defender's playing off, then I can roll 90 all day long. Okay. Now, if the defender is playing tight, but he's still worried about my vertical speed, okay, so I could touch him, but I got to kind of reach for him, or I can almost touch him. Okay. Then I'm going to probably be able to get away with a break plant separate because he's far enough away that when I put my foot in the ground, I can jab step it and get out of that quicker than what he's going to be ready to T-plan off of and get to me. And then if they're real tight on me, that's when I'm going to wide base crossover because I need to, they have to make decisions quicker and they don't have that time because we're tight. And so I can use time against them by wide base crossovering and kind of fooling them or okie doking them. And then if you got a guy that doesn't bite on it, that's when you can really get fun and start to play some games where you can fast feed your place, you can break plant separate tight, wide base crossover. That's where the athlete, the wide receiver, or the offensive player really gets some freedom to really choose what they think would be best against those really good DBs.
So as you're teaching all this, the one thing I notice is I've been going through this and working with athletes. If you're not careful, they think they understand what you want. And so they go through the motions. Well, then now their hip and their nose gets behind the foot that they're wanting. Let's say you're wanting to do a break plant separate. So you come in, you stop on your right foot. Your left foot's going to be the foot that separates. If you're not careful, all their weight stays back over their right foot, their nose, their hip, everything. And so all they really do is just take an exaggerated step and they don't really gain anything.
Yeah. So when we're doing all the change of direction work, just like you're talking about them not gaining anything, we're doing the change direction work. That's where we're really showing them like, hey, when you break plant separate, you have to push off to gain ground. Like your foot can't go 6 inches forward and that's not enough space. That's not creating separation. So we really work on them being able to understand creating separation. And then like one important thing that I tell them is any movement solution you pick, there's not a wrong one. Okay. So like if you decide to roll 90 and he's right on top of you and you probably should have wide base crossover, but you picked roll 90 and you still caught the ball, you still did your thing right, and you might have to roll 90 based on the timing of a route or the timing of a play. So don't think that like, because I'm giving you movement solutions and how to create separation when you need to. So don't think that you have to. This is more about like, hey, explore these movement options that you already know. We're just putting vocabulary to it. So then now you can be a better athlete by using them. So going back down your road about what you're saying is if they're not good with their technique, okay, it's just like anything else, like then we got to work on the technique of it, right? Their chin over their toe, things like that. The other thing that we'll see a lot of them do is they'll rise up and then they'll come back down to change direction. Well, you're telling the DB or the defender exactly when you're going to go to change direction. The key is to accelerate and be in a state where you stay low so they don't know what's happening, right? So then you're more deceptive. And then when you want to turn on the gas and go vertical, you can. But like, don't give that away. Don't make it easy on them. Make them think that they don't know what you're going to do, So, and I don't like to use the word stay low, but basically you just want to be in that accelerated state where you can change direction. If you have to come down to change direction, then you're too high. And it probably means you're going into it too fast.
Well, that's what I was wondering. And so this opens up a whole new can of worms. And this is what I had the notes on because it was something I had never thought of, which there's lots of stuff I've never thought of. But we went to the OVR. We went and hung out with Michael Fahey for a little bit, and you had him set up the OVRs so that you could see the ground contact time of the first step of whether that be the 40, whether that be a 5-10-5, whatever the acceleration length is you wanted.
Yeah.
When did you start coming up with the idea to watch what that ground contact time was on that first step and then try to maintain it as long as possible? Like that's the one ground contact time you want long.
Yeah. Yeah. So obviously I don't know the nuances of this. Like this would be probably something I need to ask Corfus because he's our track sprints coach. He knows a lot more about the first couple steps and he has a 1080. But we know that for them to accelerate faster, they have to probably push off the ground longer, but there's a point where they don't want to be on the ground too long. Right. So like figuring out what that sweet spot is for each athlete. When you're talking about that with Fahey and the ground contact time using the contact grid with his lasers. And so it just got me thinking about it. I've not done that yet. It was just had me thinking about like, okay, how do I know that they're pushing off hard enough on that first step at a speed that they can control? You know what I mean? Just kind of thinking outside the box. Or is it the first two steps? It could be a lot of different things. But a lot of times the athlete doesn't push hard enough off that first step. I do know that. And it's like, look, that's where you have the most energy stored. Use that first step or first few steps quick, and then maintain it, because that makes everything else easier. And you can always turn the jets on. It's harder though to coast into it, turn the jets on, then turn them back off, because you got to change direction, right? Like we're talking about with the testing. So if they can learn to come out fast, those first 2 steps or 3 steps hard, then they're, depending on whether they change direction 5, 10, or not at all, or 15 yards, like at least that first step, like, hey, that first step, you got to go 5 yards for any route typically, right? So that first step, and typically the most routes, it's going to be close to 7 or 10. So those first 2 steps are so important. So I think it's why I was kind of thinking about that with Fahey, and he's showing, I mean, he had all the tools right there, and it just kind of just dawned on me when I was talking to him, and we were talking to him and looking at it, like just something that's kind of interesting. I like data.
Well, yeah, and that has me thinking down a whole different line. So my daughter, she pitched in college. She's starting to give a lot of lessons. She sends me a lot of videos to break down and try to help her with. Well, if you notice this in these pictures, it seems to me like if you would set a contact grid up with an OVR and you would work, you wouldn't have to do it very, very far. You could do a 5-yard acceleration. But if you started looking at that with your pitchers, with the straight foot, ground contact time, really getting them to push hard, showing them what their ground contact time was, and then bringing that back to the mound, you should be getting a pitcher with a bigger drive coming off that mound, because they understand how long that foot has to be against the mound. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I mean, ideally, you'd probably want a force plate for that, because it starts, well, I mean, I probably want a force plate. I mean, I know they're stepping off they're off it, stepping on. So the ground contact time can bring some data to you, but really, how are they pushing off, right? Like, or is it coming more from the hip, or is it, I mean, like you could really tell more, because you have the ground contact with the force plate, you have the ground contact time, and you have the force metrics with it as well. So, poor man version, use a contact grid. If you had the funds to be able to put a force plate underneath, it would be really interesting to see some of that data, and how they're using it, and how you can tweak their training based on what their movement strategy is. Because that's the thing where it gets muddy, is each athlete's is gonna produce force and power in different ways, right? So like some are gonna use speed, more speed dominant if they're more elastic, and then some are going to use more force dominant if they are more strength based, or rigid, and then you also have that, like a combination of either one of those, and then that force, that strength, and that speed can come from different joint angles too, right? So like that's why it's so hard to like say, oh, every kid needs to be able to do it this way, and so going back to like the change direction stuff is like, look, we're working on all the different ways to change direction, and there's others too that we work on, but those are the Villani ones. And then you decide which one works best for you, and we'll give you feedback on, hey, why this worked or why it didn't work. And usually the feedback is me questioning them so that they can come up with the answer, because I'm not going to be on the field with them. I'm not their wide receivers coach. I'm not their offensive coordinator. Or defensively, like, why do we do it with the DBs? Well, if they can do it all, they understand it. Now they know how to read it, because they see it now and they felt it. You know what I mean? So they can see if a guy rises up and then comes back down, oh, he's getting ready to change direction. You know what I mean? Oh, he break down his inside foot. I better start to shade to the inside first, because that's the biggest threat. I have time on a wide base crossover. You know what I mean? Or I can sit if I know that I don't have help. I have help out there. I can sit on the inside, or if I don't have help, I got to sit on the outside because I don't have help. So I got help on the inside. So that's where it gets, when I say it gets more nuanced with football. It can get nuanced with other sports too, like soccer and things. But like, when your job is to defend one player the whole time, you have no offensive jobs when the ball gets turned over. Like that's why, like Tony talks about those guys being so good at what they do, because that's literally, they just do one side of it. Whereas like soccer, basketball, they do both sides of the invasion game. They do defense and offense.
So one more thing on the pitching, and I'll hit you with this, and then I want to get to some stuff you posted last week before we finish up. But I started wondering, now you see pitchers starting with one leg forward and one leg back. They used to not be able to do that. You used to have to be both feet on the rubber.
Mhm.
Now you can have one leg back.
Yeah.
So we'd already talked about ground contact time and the push, the poor man's, you don't have force plates, let's say, so you're using a poor man's grid with the OBR. I wonder, like Randy Huntington got into it when he was working with Sue. So when that pitcher goes and she's going to push off the mound and you're watching that back on video, do you think it would help them to have the shin angles be the same, almost like they're coming out of a block? The block's track, if those shin angles matched at the point of driving off the rubber?
I'd have to see, I would say yes initially. However, I'm not a pitching coach. I don't know, and I'm not a biomechanist, so I don't know exactly. Typically, you probably want to. Typically, how you finish is how you want to start, right? Like if you talk about a clean, if you talk about a jump, things along those lines. So I would imagine that it would be the same. However, there might be little tweaks that they do to get a little bit more hip drive, or you know what I mean, or to get a little bit more calf engagement, or pushing off the forefoot of the foot. You know what I mean? I will say, I think that every athlete is weak in the foot. And every athlete needs to get stronger in the foot, and it's not sexy, it's not fun, and it's kind of hard to do in a group setting or a big setting. So in the shoes that they're designed to wear, not only for performance but also during the day, doesn't help with our foot and big toe functioning like it should for athletics. I know that's a side note, but but when you talk about all those things, where can you use each angle of each joint to get a little bit more out of everything, right? And when you're talking about a girl going, what do they pitch right now, 60s?
It just depends, but yeah, you're going to get in the 60s in high school unless you're just dealing with an elite kid. But you know, somehow the miles per hour have really jumped in the last few years. So them college coaches have figured something out.
Yeah, so figuring out all those little things are going to get you a little bit more and more, just like you were talking about Huntington with Sue, every little thing, how can we get a little bit, they call it the, marginal gains. How can we get 1% better off of each little thing, right?
Now you were talking about foot strength, and you're right. Most athletes are weak there. And where I see it show up a lot, especially here lately, just because I've been around it in different environments, is not necessarily the clean, but the clean pull. Either a high pull or a shrug. Those guys, girls, those athletes, they don't want to drive through that foot. They just kind of want to do the motion. And it seems like if you can really get them driving through the foot hard, getting down through the big toe, that you can develop a lot of foot strength in that exercise. Is that something you've ever seen, or am I just kind of out there on an island?
Yeah, anytime you're lifting the heel, you're going to get the foot stronger, right? When you're talking about driving off of the forefoot, or the great toe. But when you talk about, there's also bridging too that they need to get stronger at too. So imagine when you talk about the tripod, there being a gap in between the arch and then being able to push through the heel through and the forefoot and the great toe all at the same time. So there's that too. Not as much application to sport, because most of the time you're playing on your toes with your heel raised in a lot of sports anyway, at least the major ones we talk about a lot. So getting stronger on that part of the foot is definitely going to be a big improvement. And the clean pulls will definitely help that. Anytime when you're getting up to a toe off is going to help that. One of the things we really played around with our track athletes especially was getting the Kaiser calf machine and then doing that barefoot and then pushing through that toe. Our head track coach, Nate Beebe, also, he does our engineering classes in the school. So he has some 3D printers, and he printed up some little ramps that are for the big toe. And so we would do toe raises where they're trying to come up onto that big toe. And it's harder than it looks like. All that stuff comes from that. He's a French researcher. It starts with a T, like Trumilio or I get his name. I butcher his name. I'm sorry, but if you look at anything on foot strength and you see the French guy that starts with the letter T for his last name, that's the guy. And he has great videos. He has great pictures and explanations on how to do any of the foot strengthening stuff. That if you're looking for things on how to strengthen the foot.
All right. Well, I know we've been going at this a while and it's starting to get late. So as far as my questions, I'll get ready to wrap it up and then we'll see what else we come up with. But
Yeah.
you sent me a video the other day that you'd built and then you posted on Instagram. And what it looked like to me was you're working through speed strength, acceleration strength with your lifters. So let's say I think you used the example, what was it? Was the kid bench pressing 315? And you knocked it down to like 75% and you were looking at meters per second and then increasing that. It seems to me like through accident, I found that that's really working for me. That 75% range, we went to 0.6 meters per second on dynamic days on our squat and 5 meters per second on our bench press and then 0.4 meters on our deadlift. So through this presentation that you kind of put out on Instagram, how have you seen that affecting your athletes now that you're more cognizant of what you're wanting to see?
So the whole premise behind all of this is that what happens, like it's a dumb question. Not a dumb question. It's just what's strong enough, right? Well, I don't think there is a too strong. I'll say that right now. There's not a too strong. Like, hey, if they're stronger, that's great. However, at some point we call it diminishing returns. Like them being able to squat, like if I have a guy that can squat 450, what's the difference between a guy that can squat 450 and a guy that can squat 470 on the football field? Can you show me the difference between both those two? Especially if the guy that can't squat 470 is more skilled, right? So at some point it's like, okay, how can we try and have more transference of training? So whatever we're doing with them off the field, have that help them more on the field. And so what I found, and I'm not the only one that found this. I took this from a lot of other guys. A lot of the stuff I stole from Fallon Ballou and Matt Ray when they were at Indiana and IMG, and really going down that rabbit hole with them and are reading all their stuff on that. But okay, when we get to a certain level of strength, okay, then I would go and look at, can they move submaximal weights at the speed they should be able to based on their strength level, and they can't. So let's focus on those deficits. So what I mean by that is for a squat or a split squat, they should, whatever their 1R, we do an estimated 1RM, which is like 90% for 3. So it should be about 0.30 meters per second for 3 at 90% on that lift. So then they should be able to do 60% of their max, okay, at 1.0, which is speed strength. That's the cusp of speed strength and strength speed. So why 1.0? Well, that cusp is when rate of force development, peak rate of force development, peak force, and peak power would all intersect. So peak force would be, if peak force is highest, is at a 1RM, right? And peak power's highest would probably be somewhere around 1.5 or higher, right? Where it's more speed dominant. Well, where do they intersect together? And peak rate of force development intersect together is at 1.0. So that's why we focus on that 1.0. With Olympic lifts, it depends on the lift, but it's about 1.65 for cleans meters per second. So can they produce, how much power can they produce at that speed? So now the weight is going to dictate the power output because we're capping the speed. And so that's why that number is so important. So then when we start to see athletes struggle there, well, that's where, to me, where athleticism happens in the weight room is when you can hit peak rate of force development, peak power, and peak force. So it's just an easy 3 birds, 1 stone type of thing for us to have a transfer to the sports that they play. So it's about 1.0 is about where they would start to toe off, right, on a jump. Okay, so that's the other thing that I kind of think about with that. So what I found, though, is typically they'll be able to do somewhere between 40 to 45% the first time we do that. And so within 3 weeks, they get to about that 60% mark or range, sometimes 65. But once they get to about 60, 65, they can't hit any more weight. They cap. That's when they plateau. So then at that 3-week mark, then we'll go back to strength work for that lift for 3 weeks. Now they get a little bit stronger. Then we go back to their peak power, and we can get another, 2 to 5% in the next our I always look at it longer than just 3 weeks, but like basically it's gonna increase. I don't want to give a specific percentage, but like I've seen guys go from like a 365 max to a 385 max, but their power output at 1.0 meters per second goes up by 1,000 watts. That's a huge difference, and that's why we track the watts that way, because we're also not then always chasing the same numbers. Now we're hitting what is our deficit, and let's attack our limiting factor. Let's get better at what we're not good at, and then we'll come back and do what we're good at, right? So, but none of that power stuff matters if you're not strong. So you got to get strong first, and then we can worry about about how fast you can produce that power. Because if you can't produce the power, that the speed doesn't have any punch behind it. So like you have to have some sort of punch. You have to have some sort of power behind that punch.
What we had stumbled on, and so when you sent me this, it was kind of the same rabbit hole I'd been down. We started at 0.6 meters per second on the squat, let's say, and we kind of bonder chucked this thing. So we decided that your whatever weight that is, let's say it's 185 on a safety squat bar on a box squat, you're 0.6 meters per second. You're going to stay at that weight until you get up to a 0.85, and that will drag you back down with chains. And typically it takes more weight, because that you'd hit on that there. And that's the one thing I had a question on, and you kind of hit on it. As that speed gets faster, their max just goes up. I don't know why that is. So when they go back, like you said, to grab their strength work, they're going to be somewhere between 25 to 50 pounds better on that max. So I started seeing that move the dial more. So when you started posting this stuff, it kind of, I guess, reassured me that I'm not the only one seeing it this way.
Yeah, let's go even deeper with that. So, like, if I'm not just doing that with squat, we're doing it with splits. Like, I love doing it with the split stance. So I don't want to say unilateral necessarily, because both legs are involved. But we'll look at split squat doing that. We'll look at reverse lunge doing that. We'll look at rear leg elevated split squat doing that. So that this way, we're not just training a specific skill, but we're training a quality, right? And so like with the squats, if we can get them over, like typically it depends on the position and the athlete and male or female, but let's say like typically want to get them over like 1,800 watts. Well, now what do we do? Right? I said we get to a point where the strength is good. Now the power is good. Now what do I want to do? So then that's when we go into the peak power. So then what we do is we put bands on. So now we're going to look at time to peak power, because they need to be able to hit that power fast enough. And so that's when we're going to really work on time to peak power, which is kind of like it's like rate of force development, but it's not. And so we put the bands on, and then I tell them, look, I want you to be able to hopefully, and I haven't had any high school athletes get here yet, but we have a couple that are close. How can we get to your time to peak power with the same weight that you were doing for your peak power with bands? So now we're adding anywhere from 80 to, what is it like for like the mini bands, 80 to 110 pounds or whatever extra? Does that sound right or no? Or less than that?
It depends. It depends on your light bands, but 80 would be a good one.
Yeah. So let's pick 80. Yeah. For black belt, and the height of the athlete's going to make different tensions. And so, but like, let's say that now you got an extra 80 pounds on there and you're going to try to hit that. Now we're really getting pretty crazy with them. And if they can get there, now we're talking about some extremely robust athletes that not only are strong, not only are powerful, but they're also fast at producing that power. And when I talk about that, that's not speed. I'm talking about like them applying force into the ground or force in some sort of manner.
And once you put the bands on, now you're improving eccentrics, because they're getting pulled faster in gravity, so they have to manage that. Come out of that, you're really catching a lot of areas of athletic development.
Yeah, that's where the fast eccentric, that's where I got it going on. The fast eccentrics is like, okay, because now they at first stuck with the bands, like they get used to using the bands and things like that. So like, we talk about slow cooking, like this is a side note, we talk about slow cooking athletes and things, but like I'm only progressing based on where they're at with good technique. But it's been interesting to me because it's like, man, like why would I keep having a kid just keep lifting heavier and heavier and heavier? And like the example I had is I had a kid go to Iowa that cleaned over 300 pounds and he weighed 175 pounds. Like, if I had him do his percentages like everybody else was going to be doing, like I'm probably going to get him hurt. Like at least I felt scared that I'm going to get him hurt over time. So and maybe I'm not, maybe, but like this, is that really going to help him getting like a 300 from a 300-pound clean to a 315-pound clean by the end of the season? Is that really going to make him that much better of an athlete? Or if we start looking at his peak power, like working on his peak power, go lighter weights faster, seeing you apply it, use that strength in a manner that's going to transfer to the field even more. Cause now you built that strength. Let's freaking use it, man. Like, cause I don't want to see him play, not necessarily that they don't play slow, but I've seen that. I've seen guys squat over 500 pounds and they can't play football because they can't get out of their stance fast enough, So, let's play to the qualities that they need and not just do the qualities that are easy per se. And I'm not saying easy. Strength is not easy to build. I mean, it's easy to build, but it takes time. It takes effort. It's not easy for the athlete. So like, let's hit the things that are that are and speed strength is also hard. Power development is hard too. It's a different kind of hard because they're like, I know I can do it, coach. Yeah, but not at that weight. You can do it at a lesser weight. You can hit 1.0 at a lesser weight, but you can't at the weight that we're trying to get you to. So that's why we got to keep building you up from there,
And you get down a bunch of different rabbit holes with that. But have you noticed that as you started doing this, it separates your strength guys from your twitchy guys immediately?
Yes and no. So like, everybody has the things that they want to stay away from. So like my strong guys that are not twitchy love the strength work, right? But then when we go into this power stuff, they don't like it. They want to fight. Like, coach, just I don't want to train. I get that you don't want to train this way, but this is what your body needs to be better for your sport. Whereas like, the ones that are twitchy, why do the basketball players not like to lift in the weight room? Because the strength part sucks for them. They're good at the faster stuff. And so once we get them strong enough, like they progress quickly through the power stuff. You know what I mean? Because they already have it they already can express fast velocities. They just didn't have the strength to express those fast velocities at that weight. So like when we go back to the neural side of it, like we know that like with the bench test with those coaches, when we were certifying them, we knew they had the strength. They can hit the speeds at a lighter weight, but they're not used to hitting the speeds at that way. So we just got to get them to realize that expression. Once they realize that expression, they can express it whenever they need to, once they get it. Right. But like, they just didn't know that they had it in there yet. And that's where like the strong guys struggle with that, and vice versa. The twitchy guys struggle with the strength part. They got to build the strength, but once they get it, man, like they're dangerous.
You've talked a little bit about bands. Have you noticed that the bands hit the twitchy kids harder than they hit the strength kids?
Yeah. Yeah. You got to be careful with all of that because you can crush kids. Not only with the bands, same with the eccentrics. You can crush kids with that too. So that's why I try to do two, maybe 3 sets of 6 to 8. Like we weren't going a lot. And when I say 8, because the first 2 reps is in kind of getting the wheel going. You know what I mean? Like, when it was the eccentrics, and then like so how we do our programming is when they're working on strength, if like they're not strong, they're working on strength every day if they're out of season. Okay. So if they're out of season, they're working on strength every day, they're up there lifting with me. So concurrently though, it's a concurrent periodization model. They'll superset whatever our strength work is with something explosive like a plyometric. So we're doing some sort of PAP work or contrast training, whatever you want to call it, with that. Okay. Now what happens where it changes is once you get strong enough or you're in season, then you only go heavy 1 day a week because I don't want to crush them during the season. But we're going heavy 1 day a week for tendon strength and to make sure that we're continuing to get stronger for the end of the season. But then they're using the other 2 days to apply that strength in a power type of way, but doing strength speed or speed strength. And so they're still doing contrast training with it, but now it's an undulation periodization model because we're doing strength, power, and speed. You know what I mean? So that's how it kind of changes, like without having to really make all these drastic changes for all of our programming. Because if you're like on the day 1, everybody's doing strength work on those lifts. Day 2, some are still doing strength work on different lifts while the other athletes are doing power work on the different lifts. And then those different lifts, the next phase after 3 weeks go to become strength lifts, and the strength lifts go to become power lifts. Unless you're not strong enough, you're still doing strength. Does that make sense? Like for
Yes, I was getting ready to ask to go a little deeper in that. Are you doing full body 3 days a week and then you're hitting three different parts of the strength curve? So you're like, let's say it, me and you had talked about this. So one week maybe, or one day you're at 1 meter per second. The next day you might be at zero point 0.6 meters per second. And then you might finish the week at 0.8, 0.85, kind of
yeah,
floating that range. Is that kind of how that you're working that?
yeah. So if they're working on strength, they're at 0.3 to zero point 0.5 meters per second, closer to 0.3 on all 3 days. If they're in season or in the power group, they're doing if they're in the power group, they're doing 0.3 meters per second on a strength day. If they're in season, they're doing closer to 0.5 because we're still hitting the quality, but we shouldn't see any soreness from it. And I haven't had very many complaints at all out of over 1,100 athletes. So 0.5 seems to be a good sweet spot. 0.5 also is the cusp of accelerative strength and circa max strength. So now we're kind of flirting on the line of those two qualities. So then our Wednesdays, our second lift, and sometimes it's a Thursday for athletes, it's 1.0 meters per second, which is speed strength or the cusp of speed strength and strength speed. And then if they're if on that third lift, then we're doing strength speed at 0.75, which is a back end cusp of accelerative strength or the front end cusp of strength speed. So we're hitting all three of those qualities that way. And then anything that's in starting strength, which is above 1.30 meters per second, we're getting all of that kind of stuff with our Olympic lifts and jumps, loaded jumps. So that's when we're like going anywhere from what I would consider a strength one would be like 1.35 to 1.50 meters per second at peak velocity. And then we have 1.5 to 1.75. We have 1.65 where we really look at their power output. And then we have times where we'll tell them to go 1.75 to 2.0 or plus 2.0, really fast and explosive. We're trying to like kind of top them off like right before a big competition.
Now, when you start talking 2.0, when you start talking them fast speeds, what lifts are you achieving that in? Are you looking at high pulls? You looking at cleans? What lifts are you programming that fast?
Cleans and high pulls, and then trap bar jumps are what I really like with above 2.0 because we're taking out any skill out of it. Really, it's just like, hey, you're just doing a loaded jump. There's some studies that showed that like trap bar jumps seem to have a better carryover than doing a jump with a barbell on the back. So that's why I prefer the trap bar jumps for those types of things. And we have open trap bars, so we'll do it from split stances as well. So that gives us a chance to be a little more creative based on the sports they may be playing or the positions we want to put them in for the movement patterns. With that undulation though too, like by having them be able to go like hit all three of those, we're making a more complete athlete. And then like we said, if they hit the power numbers, now we're working on time to peak power. Well, they're still going to be hitting those same velocities, but we're just adding bands to those velocities as opposed to just doing it without bands. So it makes it really easy to, I mean, not easy, but like it makes it, that means we can have a lot of individualization for each athlete beyond just doing sets and reps or exercises.
I know I started toying around with a little bit, but hooking an OVR to a belt and then letting them jump to see what their peak velocity is there, and then you can start looking at what lifts actually help their peak velocity in their jump. For one kid, it may be a squat. For another kid, it may be something totally different. But we don't do it a ton, just especially during track season. And then we can also tell how fresh they are. So when we're sending them to a meet, if their jump in peak velocity is down, then we know we need to get them rested and recovered and try to get them back on track. I don't know if you tinker with that any, but that seems to help me understand what's going on a little bit better.
Yeah, the next thing I really want to try and get better with is looking at their acceleration and their max velocity and then their change of direction speeds and seeing what lifts have the highest transfer training to the qualities that are not in the weight room. So I would say any sort of vertical jump or RSI, and then any sort of change of direction or speed work, and seeing how like, hey, this lift, and I think too, one thing to remember, it wasn't Bosch. It was I'll think of one of the Russian guys, but was saying that like there's a higher transfer of training. There might be a higher transfer of training for strength, but then that kind of caps off when they get to a certain level of strength. So then you need to do more power work or speed work with that lift, and you'll see even a higher transfer then. But you won't see it maybe in the beginning of it if you don't have them strong enough first. You know what I mean? So like, so there's some like, it doesn't necessarily like think beyond just the lift. Think about the velocity, the lift and the velocity, or even take the lift out of it and just think about the angles that you're creating with that movement pattern or lift, because like it could be a front squat, it could be a back squat, it could be a surge grip squat. So now all of a sudden it gives me a lot more options, right? It could be a belt squat. Or it could be like, hey, look, we don't even need to look at a bilateral squat for this. Maybe we want to look at a unilateral or a split stance squat to see if that's going to transfer more. The hard thing is like, I do think that I'm going to run into a problem, and we all run into a problem, is that everything in the weight room is so vertical based and it's not as much horizontal based. So how can we get more horizontal based resisted exercises for our athletes? Because the athletes that need to go in a horizontal manner more are probably not getting enough of that from us that they could be to get better.
That's kind of why I'm down that rabbit hole myself. I'm looking at a 45-degree hyper weighted to get that hip driving, to get that horizontal force development. Like you said, there's very few lifts we do, you know, a deadlift possibly because you're driving the hips into the bar so hard, but even then that's not true horizontal development. So yeah, I definitely see where you're at with that.
So like basically like for resisted type of things, you have hills, you have sleds, and then you kind of have like, then you got like the resisted machines, right? So like 1080, T-Apex, Run Rocket. But then we always just think about doing it as like a weighted acceleration or sprint or overspeed. But like we kind of forget about like the shuffling, the back pedals, the different lateral hops. Like, what about getting those more involved? And that's one of the things I really want. I'm hoping to be able to get enough T-Apexes this upcoming year to really focus in on some of those things for those athletes, and then trying to be able to track it in a way where we can see those things helping them. Like, because one thing to do it and think that it works, and another thing to be able to do it and then be able to provide some sort of measurements to see that it is working.
And what works for this group of athletes isn't going to work for another group of athletes. So you're trying to, now you have so many kids, it's hard to pinpoint each exact athlete, but you can start narrowing down your groups.
Yeah. And like with the change of direction stuff, going back to that, like with the Tony Vellani stuff, it's like, once we get them to those numbers, that's great that they can hit the numbers, but the agility portion of that is the decision making and the cognitive aspect of it. So that's why I try to get through the game speed stuff as quickly as we can so that they can apply it. They need to work on applying it and making those decisions quicker, right? So that they can get better at making those decisions. Otherwise, that stuff doesn't matter. And so, like, same thing with all these qualities that we're training them to do. Like, there has to be some better ways to add more things that are going to be cognitively based to help them in the weight room, so that it provides more context to the athlete when they're doing it too. So they not only do they feel it, but then they can like almost sense it.
Well, I've had you on here almost 2 hours, and which isn't necessarily out of the ordinary for us, but I know it's getting late on a Saturday night.
Yeah.
So let me ask you this last question. This is what started the whole idea to even have another podcast.
Yeah.
Tucking your elbows into your back pocket.
Yeah. Who did you just post recently? Great guy from Texas. The Texas guys got it going on.
Yeah, they do.
All those Texas strength coaches are great, man.
BJ Whitehead.
Yeah, Whitehead. Yeah, I didn't know. I don't think I've ever met him. But God, he did a great job. And like, I know he was talking about Monty and like I know Kyle Keith's down there. There's a lot of good guys down there. A lot of good guys down there and girls. Missy Macbeth, all those athletes are all those coaches are great down there, ladies. However, he was talking about tucking the elbows in the back pocket, which I've heard before with deadlifts. But it's funny because with cleans, on the lift off, we actually tell them to point the elbows out. You want the elbows pointed out. So instead of bringing them back, we want them out. We want our shoulders over the bar. Whereas with deadlift, we want the shoulders behind and retract the scaps. So it got me thinking this like that. When I heard that, like, man, I never thought about some of the positions of certain joints doing very similar lifts, trying to get a certain stimulus from the lower half, but having completely different cues. And like, why are we cueing it that way for them? You know what I mean? Like, to pull more weight, obviously, for a deadlift, and you want to pull more weight. But like, one of the things that made me think about it is like, we have our athletes straight bar deadlift before they trap bar deadlift. They, like, for our males, we want to be able to straight bar deadlift over 250 pounds for 3 reps, because we want to eventually hopefully get them all cleaning over, hopefully cleaning 250 or more, but at least 225 for 3 reps, depending on their size and training age. So by them being able to at least be able to pick it up from the ground, they know that they can at least lift it, right? So that's why we do the straight bar. But when we actually call it a clean grip deadlift. And so we have them in a hook grip, and we have them with their elbows out. They're still tracking the bar vertically up the shins, but we want to make sure that they're keeping the elbows out so that they can not bend the elbows too early on the first and on the second pull, and then also make sure that they're not that it actually kind of helps clear room for them to punch the elbows forward on the catch. Whereas like with deadlift, that's not the concern, right? We want to keep everything tucked back so that we can keep pulling through the range of motion, especially after you clear the knees. They're keeping that bar tight to the body, because usually that's where you see the displacement of once they get past the shins, right? Like, so that's what got me on that thinking about that. And I was like, man, and I've coached powerlifters before too. And it's funny because like, I never even thought about, like, I'll teach them, hey, elbows in the back pockets when we're teaching them straight bar deadlift for powerlifting. But like, when we're teaching them how to lift for like a clean, we cue them totally different. So I wonder how many athletes I confused over the years, telling them 2 different things.
That's, it wasn't on purpose, but we sumo lift because I think it's really good for athletic development. So then if we do high pulls or something like that, it's not near as confusing, I hope, because the sumo is a different lift.
Yeah.
So hopefully that when I send some of these guys to college and they're expected to clean and all that, it just isn't super confusing for them.
Yeah. And I've been really intentional in focusing on my cues probably the last 5 years, trying to get better at using external cues. And also trying to, I call it cueing with questions. So like, trying to, instead of telling them how to do it, ask them what I want them to do in a form of a question. So that hopefully they can come up with whatever the movement solution would be for them, or an analogy for them. Because me telling them like, hey, I want you to point towards hold the barbell, but I want you to point towards the plates. And so like, then they understand that the elbows are pointing out. Like, instead of me just telling that, like, hey, how can you point your elbows, or how can you point to the plates without taking your hands off the bar? And so then they're like trying to figure that out, and they're like, oh, can I use my elbows, coach? Perfect. That's what we want to see, as an example of like trying to cue with questions externally, which has been a good challenge to try to be a better coach, and trying to get them to, when they answer the question, they're going to internalize it better. They're going to remember it better, as opposed to me just telling them over and over and over again.
Yes. It seems like you could tell them 1,000,000 times, but if they can figure it out on their own, they're going to get it in 5. Mm-hmm. So, yeah. How do you want to spend your time?
Yeah, exactly, brother.
Well, man, I know you got other things going on. I turned this into probably more than what you really wanted, but I got you suckered in, so I appreciate your time.
Well, it's fun, man. I appreciate you doing it. We always talk, and like, it was good. It's good kind of getting out there, and hopefully it's helpful. You know what I mean? So keep pushing.
I know it was nice to get back from vacation, sit down, talk to somebody that I know I talk to quite a bit. So it kind of got me back in the groove to start doing these the next few months. So yeah, that you would sit down on a short notice evening really helped me out tremendously.
Oh, thanks, brother.
All right, man. Well, you have a wonderful evening.
Yeah, you too, man.
All right.